Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, landing another commitment Wednesday morning in the 2026 cycle, coming from three-star safety Xavier Lherisse from the state of Florida. These kind of commitments always remind me of the pull that this Oregon program currently has under Dan Lanning on the recruiting trail, where you go across the country into the state of Florida and start grabbing some of the best players in that state. And it's not only Florida. I mean, Oregon will do that in the state of Texas. They'll go into the Midwest. They'll go all the way across the country to the Atlantic coast in Maryland. I mean, there's just nowhere geographically that's off limits for this Oregon program. Then you get into Xavier Lherisse, and I think kind of a kid that flies under the radar because he's a little bit shorter for a defensive back. You love the player instincts when you turn on the film. He's always around the football, whether it's in the back end, kind of being a ball hawking safety, whether it's coming up into the box and supporting the run and making tackles in space. A lot of different things that this kid brings to the table for Oregon in the back end of the defense. I think the most fascinating conversation is where does he play for Oregon when he gets to Eugene? He's a guy that plays a lot of safety at the high school ranks, but when he comes into the box, when he's playing that nickel corner spot, sticky in man coverage, really good tackler in space, I personally probably like him at that nickel cornerback spot the most for Oregon, but a guy that can do a lot of different things. And we say this all the time, grab kids that are versatile in the back end, and it helps you kind of get all your best football players on the field. Xavier Lherisse, player instincts are elite, certainly a versatile kid, and he's really, really physical. He's a guy that is not afraid to come downhill and tackle in space. And that's something that, look, it's getting more and more important as college football continues to trend to speed and space, and offenses trying to spread you out and try to get the football to their playmakers in space. And because of that, defenses are playing with more defensive backs on the football field. If you're going to play with more defensive backs on the field, you need them to be able to tackle. And Xavier Lherisse can do that at a high level, whether it's from the safety spot, whether it's from nickel. Like this commitment. Obviously, Oregon really likes this kid. They wouldn't be taking him this early if they didn't like him. Want to get into some of the film. I want to talk about where Oregon is going on the recruiting trail, where you're seeing an interesting battle right now where USC and Oregon, the two powers on the West Coast, are currently in the month of February battling for that number one class in the country. We'll see how we're going into a big next couple of weeks and months on the recruiting trail. Going to be fun the next couple of weeks. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys. Y'all know I love talking the high school recruiting trail. And for the Oregon fans who continue to rock with the fellas in the spring, summer months, appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into Xavier Lherisse. And again, this kid to me is he's got the physical traits necessary. I think the play speed. I don't have any track times on him, but you turn on the film and say, well, we ain't worried about how fast this kid is because he plays really, really fast. Sometimes when we talk about the high school recruiting trail, we kind of just look for what do they weigh, how tall are they, the physical traits. And Xavier Lherisse, this is not me getting up here and saying he's not a good athlete, because he certainly is. But he's a guy that when you turn on the film, that's what you love the most. You love what you see as a football player. Getting into it a little bit, I want to start with just what he does in the back end. This is a guy that is really, really comfortable reading the quarterback's eyes and going up and making plays on the football. Really smooth mover too. And that's another thing you'll see. I mean, you see some juice on his return as well. He's a guy that when you do look at his offensive film, he certainly could play wide receiver too. Really comfortable with the football in his hands. Really, really good mover. That's probably what you like the most. But you see just such a multi-dimensional game, right? And we're playing that high safety role where, hey, we're going to keep our eyes on the quarterback. And when we see that football go up in the air, we're going to go and go play the football. And he's not necessarily the biggest defensive back, but he ain't got no problem playing the ball at the highest point, like going up and making plays. There's a lot to like. And as you continue to work through the film, you're going to see him say, hey, well, let's come up and go make plays around the line of scrimmage. I mean, firing downhill, really physical at the point of attack, a guy that can tackle in space and plays really hard. That's important for these defensive backs, tackling in space. See him on offense. And again, I am worried about the speed. There's no track times here, but he's running away from everybody. And we're not concerned about how fast he's, which is important because you look at what got Oregon in trouble at times in 2024, specifically against a team like Ohio State. These safeties just they couldn't cover ground the way they needed to. Kobe Savage, Deshaun Johnson, good football players, but probably just weren't fast enough. If you want to bang with these teams like Ohio State and Texas, you got to have the speed to match what Ohio State's going to be trotting out there in terms of wide receivers. And you think Xavier Lherisse can do that. Continuing to work through it. Again, loves to be around. This is why I love him around the line of scrimmage, because he just finds the football and kind of makes those game-changing plays that you want from your defensive backs. Really, really exciting kid. You see the juice that he has on the offensive side of the football as well. Really, really good athlete with the football in his hands. I wonder if you get him involved in special teams as well. And look, Oregon has plenty of guys who are good athletes with the football in his hands, but Xavier Lherisse is certainly that guy too. Playing a little bit more of that high safety role. Again, just absolute ball hawk. Really good feel in the back end. Kind of a turnover machine. I mean, I think we're, a minute into this thing. We've seen him create already a couple turnovers. Breaks on the football really well, too. That's probably another thing where, look, there's a throwing window here, and it quickly gets closed by Xavier Lherisse. And that's him playing a little bit more nickel, and that's where I love him the most as a football player. I like it. I like it, and you look at Oregon in 2026 and say we're going in the right direction, right? Number 2 class in the country. You're battling USC. I believe On3 has them as the number 1 class in the country, so it's just USC, Oregon going to battle here. I think the next biggest storyline for Oregon fans on the recruiting trail is quarterback Jared Curtis, right? He kind of cut his list down to 2. This is a two-horse race between Oregon and Georgia. Was previously committed to Georgia. It sounds like Oregon probably has the leader in the clubhouse here. I'll say this about Jared Curtis. I'm much higher on him than I was 6 months ago. 6 months ago, him going into his junior year, coming off a sophomore year where, look, all the physical traits that you wanted, but was a 55% completion percentage guy, goes into his junior year, completes over 70% of his passes, big time arm, pushes the ball down the field exceptionally well. To me, in his junior year, he put it together. And I think he's comfortably one of, if not the best quarterbacks in this 2026 class. And we'll see if Oregon can land him. And one of the most intriguing storylines that we've seen for Oregon on the recruiting trail is this is suddenly a program that is a destination for quarterbacks and wide receivers. I mean, you look at the offenses they've put together the last couple of years with Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel. I mean, 2 of which were, Heisman contending quarterbacks. When you start getting that pipeline, that track record of, hey, you come to Oregon and you're competing for Heisman trophies, you're obviously competing for national championships, you're putting up a ton of numbers, it's going to attract good quarterbacks to your program. We're seeing that before our eyes. Oregon is suddenly every single class just one of the top teams for some of the top quarterbacks in the country where, 10 years ago, I don't know if that was necessarily the case. Oregon would land really good quarterbacks, but it didn't necessarily seem like a destination program for quarterbacks. Now it is. It's for that and wide receivers, which I think excites a lot of Oregon fans. We'll see how this one shapes up. It sounds like it could. He's going to make some spring visits in early March, both to Georgia and Oregon, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have a decision somewhere after that. And so Jared Curtis probably becomes like the next name to really keep an eye on. Going to be a really fun next couple of weeks and months for Oregon. A lot of big-time names coming on campus over the next couple of weeks. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.